This is Ken from Coffee Crafters, and we thought we'd do a quick video on doing your very first roast on your Artisan XE base model. And doing the first roast is always the most stressful part for a new roaster. And we want to do a video to show you how easy it really is to roast. It would be a big benefit to you if you haven't done a lot of research on the internet about roasting, because if you do that, you would think you needed a PhD before you start, and that's really not true. We've done blind cuppings with professional cuppers, trying to tell the difference between all these different roast profiles, and I can tell you, if you get between that 8 and 12 minute sweet spot for the roaster, they had really a hard time telling the difference. Roasting faster than 7 minutes, you can tell that the coffee is underdeveloped inside and it's kind of a real bitter taste. And roasting longer than 15 minutes and it gets that baked taste. So I went ahead and turned the exhaust blower on, and that's a really good thing to do before you dump your beans in. We're going to do a 2-pound load today. So on the Artisan XE base model, we have a chute that goes in the front of the hood. So we remove that little trap door, that we can pour our beans right into there. Now, one of the things I can do, I'm 6 feet tall, so I can see down in here, but it's kind of cool if you look in there when you first start establishing your roast. It's a good way to look in to the hopper and watch the beans start lofting and get used to shutting it off, turning it on, shut it off. Before you ever start with the heat, practice that a few times just to get used to establishing the loft. So we got our light shining through the back. If you keep your chaff guard really clean, it really helps, because it helps the light shine around inside and you can see the loft. We're going to do a 2-pound load. I thought about doing a 1-pound load, but one of the things I noticed is pushing the probe down through the 2 brackets to its lowest possible position, it will actually catch enough of the bean bed to measure the temperature. But if you don't push it down, it'll be real confusing for your first roast, because you'll be looking at your bean temperature, which is what we'd like you to watch, and it won't be accurate. So I'm using a 2-pound load, and I suggest that you use a 2-pound load for your very first load. So I want to show you on this roast that you can roast a complete cycle without adjusting the heat. All of our Artisan roasters have a nice even ramp. There's no need to adjust the heat up and down regardless of what you read about starting out slow, fast, whatever. That's not how commercial roasters do it. We have over 1,300 roasters out there, and I only know of a handful of people who actually use that computer software while they're roasting. Roasting really is the easy part, and they try to concentrate on the parts of their business that are more difficult. So we're going to go ahead and establish the roast. I'm going to time this so we can see how long it's going to take. So I got about a 3 to 5 inch loft over the bean bed. I'm going to set my temperature to 5 on the dial, on the heat dial. I got it set right at 5, and we can do our entire roast without adjusting the heat with that. So I've turned on the heat, and now we're roasting coffee. One of the things you want to make sure of is that you never let the loft stop. If you do, all that superheated air will catch the bean bed on fire, and that'll happen. So it's the one thing with fluid bed roasters in a conical hopper where you have that loft going through the center of the bean. Make sure that it's always moving. Your roaster's safety shutoff temperature is set to 850 degrees. So the LED readout on the top of the roaster is the roast air temperature. If that were to get to 850, and you don't want to roast that hot, but if it did get to 850, it would shut the heat off. And when it shut the heat off, then you get a voltage spike. So you don't control the roast with that temperature switch. That's a high temperature safety shut off, and it lets you know what your roast air temperature is. But the one metric that I'll recommend you always watch, I still watch it today, is the bean temperature rate of rise. So when we look at the thermometer here, I'm going to watch that. When it gets to about 400 degrees, we're going to hear first crack. I'm roasting a Guatemalan bean today, and so the other thing that you're going to want to be aware of is the temperature probe that you inserted in the bean bed and this thermometer. There's a possibility it could be accurate out of the box, but more likely you're going to have to calibrate it. So in the little blue bag that your thermometer body came in, you will see a little jeweler's screwdriver in there. The flathead part of the screwdriver, if you want to calibrate your thermometer, you wait till you hear first crack and you calibrate that to 400 degrees. So if it's higher or lower on a medium density bean like a Guatemalan or a Colombian, adjust that to 400 degrees and then leave it, and then it's adjusted. The only thing I'm going to do during the roast for an adjustment on my roast is adjust the loft. So as the beans are roasting, it drives the moisture out. They will up to double in size, and so they will loft higher. And so I will turn that down to keep my bean loft in that 3, 4, 5 inch range. And again, if you want to look inside, you can take the gate out for off of the bean chute and look inside if you're tall enough to look over there. Yeah, it's a good way to look in there and see what's going on. It's got enough vacuum here with that 1550 CFM blower that no smoke's going to come out. You can work around the roast area when you're roasting, but we recommend that you stay next to the roaster when you're roasting. You wouldn't want to go do something else and then come back and see how things are going. You're roasting coffee with these, and it's really a hands-on process. On the exhaust system, everything on the inboard side that you just installed is vacuum. So you have the Y on the exhaust blower. One side of the Y, a 4-inch, goes to the hood. The other side goes to the bean cooler. And those sides, if they have a leak, it doesn't matter because it's vacuum and it just sucks in. What you want to be really careful of is the venting on the discharge side of the blower that goes to the outside. That is pressure, and pressure will push the smoke out through a seam if there's a hole. So make sure to tape your seams on that outboard side. One of the things you'll notice, on the deluxe model, we have a hood over the bean cooler, but on your base model, it doesn't have that. But one of the things we found when we were testing is we put a black background behind the unit here when we were dumping, so we could see the smoke and see what the smoke is doing. You can unlock the hopper, turn it 30 degrees towards the bean cooler, and it's still lofting into the hood. So when you dump the beans, you're already downdrafting, and there's just a little tiny puff of smoke that goes up. So it doesn't really lose much smoke. It actually vents really well. So when we're doing our dump cycle, what we're going to do is when we get about 5 degrees away from our ending bean temperature, I'm going to roast these to 445 degrees because I like my Guatemala at 445 degrees. So when we're about 440 degrees, I'm just going to reach over and pull the blast gate out on the bean cooler so that it's already downdrafting when I dump the bean. So we should get pretty close to probably 10 or 11 minutes with this roast. That puts us in that sweet spot of 8 to 12 minutes. If I was going to do a roast right behind this one, it will knock off about a minute to 2 minutes, right in there somewhere on the total roast. I don't know if you can see through the hood, but we're getting really close to first crack, so we have a lot of chaff coming off now. We're at 400 degrees, so we just hit first crack. And as soon as you hit first crack, that's when the steam inside that bean is expanding it, and that's what breaks it open. It breaks down right down the seam. You can hear that first crack now. And what you're gonna see now is you're gonna see a lot of chaff coming off because bean expands and then the skin on the outside comes off and the chaff goes up. One of the nice things about the fluid bed roaster is, unlike a drum roaster where the chaff can stay in there and burn with the beans and give it a bitter taste, the chaff gets sucked out of here before it combusts. And so by the time the beans have ejected their chaff and it gets towards a state where the bean's gonna start really darkening up and you know, and cooking inside, we're about 430 degrees. So we're going to be inching it up towards our ending bean temperature. Our total roast time is going to be right at about 10.5 minutes on this one. So again, as we get ready to dump the beans, which we're going to do here shortly, I'm going to open the blast gate on the cooler. And we can go ahead and do that. So when I get ready to dump on the XC, both models, we're going to slightly lift up to disengage the hopper, and then we're going to rotate it to the right. And as soon as the beans are in the hopper, we want to seat the hopper back in its seat. The only time the hopper should not be seated on its mount tube is if you take it off for cleaning or if you're dumping beans. So that's the place it should be. So that's it. So we left that heat setting on 5 the entire time at about 10.5 minutes total roast time. And we didn't adjust anything but the loft. So again, as you're going through the roast cycle, you'll see the loft get higher and you have to occasionally turn it down, but that's basically it. If you were to roast right behind this one, you could just put it in as this is cooling, so you can roast and cool it at the same time. On a warm machine, it'll be about 1.5 to 2 minutes shorter roast time, but other than that, it will be fine. Now, as you move up to roasting full batches, you can load your 10 pounds of beans in there, turn it all the way up on high and turn it on. And most of the time you're going to be in there. Now if you're in an area where it's fairly warm and you have really good voltage, if you have, we see people with 245, 248 volts, you're going to have to turn down the machine a little bit on your 10-pound loads. But watch your total roast time and watch where that setting is. So that's it. We just did our first roast and yeah, it was pretty simple. So thanks for watching.